So here's my ZeroSR 2018 with a 14.4 kilowatt battery pack. All right, 14.4. Let's see, I bought this thing back in March, I think, of last year. March, or was it February? Shoot, I can't remember. March or February. Anyways, had it less than a year. Let's look at the mileage. So it has 7,800, excuse me, 7,900, 7978. So basically a little shy of 8,000 miles. A little shy of 8,000 miles. I bought this bike with about 2,000 miles to, what was it? It was 2,200, 2,300, around there somewhere. So a little bit over 2,000 miles. So basically I rode it for, let's see, 8 minus 2 is 6. So I rode it almost 6,000 miles. And basically it's my commuter bike. I replaced this bike with, or excuse me, I should say I replaced my Super Cub with this bike. So so I was commuting with my Super Cub, and before that I had a Honda Elite 110, and I had the Honda Elite 110 for like, about 10 years. And up to that point, the whole time that I had that, I always felt that the Honda Elite was the best commuter bike I've ever ridden. I've had many bikes. I've tried many different bikes and many setups, and I thought the Honda Elite was the best one. Then when the Super Cub came out, I got that. And when I got that, I'm like, oh, I don't want to have too many bikes, so I got rid of the Elite. I rode the Super Cub for a while, and I would say the Super Cub does, for commuting. I would say it's not as good as the Super Cub for commuting. Is not as good as the Elite. The Elite's better, just because it's because the twist and go, and there's less maintenance because it's a CVT belt drive, so there's you don't have to clean and lube a chain. But also having a lock storage compartment. But with the Super Cub, I put on a top box. But actually, I had that with the Elite too. The Elite, I had the trunk under the seat and also the top box, so I had a lot of storage space. Whereas the Super Cub was just the top box only. So anyways, so I got this thing because I wanted an electric for a while. I just couldn't afford, I couldn't afford an electric. Then I came upon this thing, got it used. And I started commuting on this thing this past year. And I'm gonna have to say that this bike is the best commuter bike I've ever used. Mainly because, as far as storage wise, it doesn't have that much storage. I still have the top box, the same top box that I use on my Super Cub. So I have that limitation, or that size, whatever size it is, and there's a small storage in the front. But that's not the thing that made this bike the best commuter bike. The best commuter bike is because it's like I don't have to do nothing. That's nothing, literally I don't have to do nothing. I just come home at night, plug it in, next morning unplug it, good to go. I get to work, and I'm fortunate enough that I could plug it in at work because my commute is about 40 miles and through the mountains, and I ride fast through the mountains. So when I commute to the mountains, it uses up, depending on how fast I ride. If I ride really fast, I could easily use up 60% of my charge. If I ride really slow, for example, I go to speed limit the whole entire time, I will only use up about maybe 30% of my charge. 30, maybe 40% at the most. So somewhere in that range. So usually I don't ride fast enough, or able to ride fast enough because there's traffic and stuff to use up 60% charge. So usually it's more common that I use about 50% of my charge on the ride home, or excuse me, on the ride to work. That distance from home to work. But you have to understand that with this bike, whatever mileage it says for the estimated miles, and that's always a right. That's the range. When you have the range of whatever it says when whatever given charge percentage, and the range that it has. You have to understand that with this bike, You go, oh, if I use 50% to get to work, I should be able to use 50% to get home, or maybe I only use 45% to get to work. I should be able to use 45 to get home. You have to understand that the higher charge percentage has, basically the top 50% charge percentage has more range than the bottom 50%. So let me give you an example. Like if I say I charge it to 100%, if I go down from 100% to say 80%, I could get like, I don't know. Let's say I could get like 20 miles. Let's say 15 miles if I ride fast, right? If I ride really fast, I could get like 15 miles. But if I'm down at, and that's from 100 to 80, but if I'm down at 20% to 0%, I'd be lucky if I could get 10%, or 10 miles if I ride really fast. Probably not. And usually by then too, when your state of charge drops down, the voltage on the battery is less. The bike actually also has less power as well. So basically what I'm saying is that the state of charge and how much miles you get, or percentage of charge per percentage is not linear to per miles. So let's say you get let's say you get 100 miles per charge. So that doesn't mean that 1% charge will get you 1 mile. On the top end, 1% charge might give you maybe 1.25 miles or something like that. Whereas the bottom end, the last 20% or so, 1% will only give you like maybe 3/4 of a mile or something like that. So it's less. So anyways, use this for commuting for quite some time, and it's fantastic. It's, again, you gotta do nothing. Just go in, plug it in. In the past, I used to check my tire pressure every single day that I ride. It doesn't matter if I ride 2-3 days consecutively, I would check my pressure every single day. And as time went by, I got lazy, and I started only checking, once every couple of days, and then I started only doing it once a week. Then now, today, lately, I don't check my pressure for like a month or two sometimes. So with this bike, I don't even bother to check the tire pressure even for like a couple months. And the last time I actually checked the tire pressure, because it had a flat. I actually got a flat. I got a nail, and you can see the video of. I think I made a video of that, fixing the flat on this. But yeah, so you don't have to do nothing. So that's almost zero maintenance. The biggest maintenance that I have to do on this bike is changing the tires. Wearing out the tires, because again, I do commute to the mountains. Commuting to the mountain, especially when you're riding fast, you wear out tires really fast. So this bike, being an electric, it has a lot of torque. So a lot of torque also wears out tires fast too. Weight-wise, it's not that heavy. It's only what's the Zero says is what, 415 or 416 pounds. And I added the rear rack and stuff, and the top box and all that stuff. So let's say this bike is about 430 pounds. That's still pretty light, relatively light. And the thing is that it has a low center of gravity. So it feels even lighter because of that. The only time I really feel any weight is if I'm like if I'm like standing on the side to the side and I'm just pushing the bike back and forth. That's when I feel that 400 and 400 plus pounds. Outside of that, I don't feel that. It feels really light. Handling wise, it handles really well. I mean, the chassis and suspension it's really good for what it is. For factory suspension. I've had a lot of bikes, but I've never had any like high-end bikes. I've only had like entry-level bikes and maybe mid-grade bikes at best, at the most expensive. So those type of bikes, they don't necessarily come with the best suspension, the best shocks and forks, adjustable and stuff. This is the first bike that I had where both the front and rear has adjustable suspension in compression and rebound on top of preload. So it's really nice. Once you adjust the preload properly and adjust the compression and rebound properly, man, this thing rides so smooth. It's the best stock suspension I've ever ridden. It's, and I've had other bikes where I've actually upgraded to Öhlins suspension. A couple of bikes, actually, 2 or 3 bikes. Well, 3 bikes that I upgraded to Öhlins suspension. And the thing with when you upgrade to Öhlins, because Öhlins is meant as performance, so it's always a little bit stiffer because when you have more performance, the spring rates tends to be a little stiffer. This bike is not stiff like that. It's comfortable. It's meant for solely for street use, and it is so comfortable. It's so smooth. I can't believe how smooth this bike rides, and not just the suspension, but also because it's electric. There's no vibrations at all. It doesn't have bar end weights. I just put in a metal plug here, but there's no weight in here. And there's no vibration in handlebars. The only vibration you feel is the vibration from the road. The whatever bumps you ride over on the road. That's the only vibration there is. Outside of that, there's no vibration. And I guess if you're going fast enough, when the wind blows you around, there's a little bit of that wind, that feeling of the wind where it feels kind of like it's vibrating, but it's actually not vibration, but it's just, I guess that's just aerodynamics. So yeah, so suspension wise, it rides really good. The chassis is real good. The chassis is solid. On my first review that I did, when I did the initial review, first 500 miles or so that I rode it, I had mentioned the swing arm being kind of flexy. I'm feeling it like kind of jiggling and loose. It wasn't the swing arm. It was the improper setup suspension. Because when I first bought this bike, I had assumed, because I bought it used, but I bought it from the dealership because the dealership was actually using this bike as like a loaner bike. Because it was it was like a BMW. It was like a high-end dealership where they actually had loaner bikes, and they actually used this bike as a loaner bike when they service. When people bring their BMWs and Ducatis in and stuff, so they would actually loan this out. So I had assumed that it was factory setting. And on that video I had mentioned, the swing arm was kind of goofy, but it actually wasn't when I actually went in and looked at the suspension setup, it was like completely off. I don't know who messed with the suspension. It definitely wasn't the factory setting at all. It was way off from the factory setting. So that's the reason why the rear end felt kind of loose and kind of it didn't track right. But after I dial everything in, boy, it rides so smooth and it's solid. It's nice and stiff. Everything is good. It's stiff enough where it tracks really well, but at the same time, it's not so stiff where it's harsh. So great street bike. Great bike for riding in the mountains. The only downside to this, performance-wise, is the front brakes. The front brake, the size of the rotor is good, but the thing is, because there's only one rotor, because the heat's produced, right, and it heats up really quickly when you ride in the mountains, fast. So you feel the brakes start to fade. I mean, I guess you can also always upgrade to higher temperature pads, and that could get rid of solve that problem. But when the brakes are cool, it works fine. It's plenty strong. But it's when it's gets too hot, that's when it fades. So I think that's the only weakness of this bike. Everything else it's fantastic. The torque on it, the power. This one is the one with no quick charge. So basically you have to use the wall outlet, the regular wall outlet, 110, 120 wall outlet. So it does take about approximately an hour for every 10% of charge. But it depends on the condition, on the temperature condition. So let's say, for example, if the battery is really hot, you just roll. If it's a really hot day and it's been out in the sun and you just rolled or whatever and everything's real hot, it'll take forever to charge. It's better to actually let it cool down or park it in the shade for a few hours to let it cool down before you plug it in. Because if everything's real hot, and you could see the temperature of the battery in the app, right, through the app. So if you look at that, so let's say the temperature of the battery is 120, 130 degrees, and you plug it in, it's like it doesn't want to charge. It just kind of hovers, and it just only charges like a couple percentage per hour. But you give it a few hours to cool down to, say down to like 100 degrees, also it'll charge okay. It'll charge fine, fast again. But that's the only time there where I had a relatively slow charging. But But when the temperature is it's cooler for it, it charges actually faster compared to when the temperature is hotter. I mean, I've never charged it at because there's a lithium ion batteries. You're not supposed to be charging things at the lithium ion when it gets to freezing temperatures. So I've never had it in that temperature range, so I don't know how it performs there. But let's say at 45 degrees, and which it does see 45 degrees, and it charges just fine. And it charges really well at that temperature, pretty fast, because once you plug it in, it starts charging. It starts to warm up, so it's actually higher than the ambient temperature of 45. Yeah, so this bike is fantastic. Again, best commuter bike I've ever ridden. The handling, so the weight's really low, so that's a positive. And the most, if you've never ridden electric before, the most awkward thing and this took me a while. It took me like, I think, at least a couple thousand miles to get used to, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 miles to get used to, is that because there's no engine, because when you have an engine, you have all these rotating parts inside the engine, the crank, the gears, and all this stuff, all this rotating mass in the engine. So naturally, the engine is also a gyroscope. So besides the two wheels spinning being a gyroscope, the engine is also a gyroscope. So without that gyroscopic effect on this, even though you have the spinning of the motor, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as having an engine, because the engine there's more there's more parts, more things spinning, and a lot. I think there's more mass there. So without that gyroscopic effect of the engine, this bike feels kind of, initially when you first turn, when you're not used to that, it feels so light that you feel like you're falling over. Like literally, like you're turning, and it feels like you're like, oh, I'm gonna fall over and low side or something like that, because there's no gyroscopic force to keep it upright. So you don't have to fight that gyroscopic force. So it's so light. It's like riding a really light bike, like a small displacement bike, compared to like a large displacement bike, where with a small displacement bike you could just turn in really quick, especially transitioning side to side. You can feel it because everything is so light. This bike is kind of like that. Transition wise, it's not as quick, because again, it does weigh 400 and over 400 pounds. So it's not as quick as like a 300-pound bike, for example. Like my previous bike, CB 300R, that bike was down to close to 300 pounds, and that the transition was very fast because 300 pounds. But if I compared just that turn in from my CBR 300 to this bike actually feels like it's quicker, because you don't have any gyroscopic forces that you have to push against. Even comparing to my like little bikes, like my Monkey, or even my old scooter, my Elite 110. Even those little tiny bikes felt like there was more gyroscopic force holding it upright compared to this bike, where it felt like nothing. Like there's nothing there. You're like, what the heck? So that was really it was very awkward at the beginning, and it was also kind of, it made me feel uneasy, like I was gonna crash the bike. So for like the first 4,000 or 5,000 miles, riding in the twisties, I felt like I was gonna crash the bike all the time. But it was completely solid, and it rails surprisingly. It's really well. It rides really good. So that's the biggest thing when you go electric that you have to think about. But once you get over that feeling, man, this thing is fantastic. So smooth, so quiet. All there is just wind noise. I don't even hear that much. Actually, I don't even hear that much road noise from the tires, surprisingly. It's mainly wind noise, and if you're accelerating, you'll hear the whine of the motor. But if you're at a constant speed, I don't notice much sound from the motor at all. I don't really notice much of the belt sound either. Maybe at like really slow speed, like parking lot speeds, 5, 10, 15 miles an hour, it might be loud enough where you can hear it. But once you get past that, the wind noise is gonna be louder than the belt. Other noise is the brakes, because disc brakes, these type of brakes, by their design, they're inherently, it's always the brakes themselves. It's always gonna be a little bit of rubbing of the brake pad on the disc. So there's always gonna be a little bit of that rubbing. So I actually hear that on the front brakes. So that's the other sound I hear on this bike. So yeah, so it's a fantastic bike. And too bad Zero, updated the SR, and now they don't have this one with this chassis anymore. The new one with the new chassis. Man, I think this is the better bike than the new one. It's lighter by quite a bit. Because the new one is like almost 500 pounds. This one is 80 pounds lighter. So that makes a big difference. And the range is like this. It basically, actually, I think this one might have better range than the new one, just because the battery size is the same. It's still, the new one is still 14.4, right? Well, maybe if you go with the very new one with the option, if you go into the app and pay for the actual option, you could go up to a bigger than 14.4 to, I think, what was it, 15 or 16 or whatever it is. But even then, range-wise, I think this is about the same, comparable to that with that higher battery option. So I really like this bike. It's an awesome bike. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. It's just so convenient and so easy to ride. Push and go, no maintenance. Low center of gravity. I guess the other negative thing I have to say about it is the lock to lock. So the lock to lock here, I think it locks too soon. I would like to have a few more degrees of rotation for like tight maneuvers. When you do tight maneuvers, that helps. When I first got this thing, and I do actually right up over here, I do a U-turn in this little space right here between the building and the fence. I do all my bikes, and this is a lot of space. This is plenty of space. This is like, I don't know, 30 feet or whatever. So it's plenty of space to do a U-turn, especially if you use the whole thing. But lots of times I'm like parked somewhere maybe about halfway or somewhere near half of that between that two spot. And with most bikes, I could just really quickly turn the steering wheel and just lean it over real quick and counterbalance, and I could make a U-turn real quick. With this bike, the first time I did that, man, I basically dropped the bike. I soft dropped it because I hit the steering lock. I hit the lock and I'm like, oh shit, and I just fell over real gently. No scratches or nothing like that because I was, because it was such slow speed. But so that's the only other negative, besides the brakes getting hot, riding it under spirited conditions or spirited pace, and the steering lock needs to be a few more degrees, maybe like another 5 degrees or so. It would be good. Another 5 degrees on each direction. So basically a total of like another 10 degrees or so. It'll probably be good. Yeah, what a fantastic bike. So again, that's my thought on the ZeroSR after having it for almost a year. 6,000 miles or so, 6-ish thousand miles. And it's just commuting. And that's all I use it for, is commuting, because of that range. If I want to take this on a spirited day ride, I really can't, because it only, if I ride really fast, I only get like 75, 80 miles of range, and that's not enough for a day ride for me. When I go on a day ride, I like to ride for like 200 miles. So unfortunately, I don't have that fast charge again, the quick charge tank. So I can't be taking it on day rides. So I only use it exclusively for day rides, and also my running around town bike too. It surprisingly, even though it's bigger than it's much bigger and heavier than a scooter, it's surprisingly easy to ride around town, because again, it's just twist and go, right? So I use it as my errands bike as well. So I need to run to the market, get a jug of milk or something like that. and I take this thing. It's because it's so easy to ride. So yeah, so that's my thought on the ZeroSR. Again, it's kind of unfortunate that they don't make this model anymore. They make the S model without the R. So, but it's it's a lower power, lower battery, smaller battery. So that's really unfortunate that they replace it with what I think is I think the new SR is inferior to this SR. I think this SR is better. You get more bang for your buck basically. As a total package, I think it's better. Let's see what else I have to say with this. I've had no problems with it. Everything works good. No issues at all, really. Again, the only thing I did was change the brakes. I did go through the front brake pads, one set of front brake pads. About how long ago was that? I think that was probably about 1,000 miles ago. So my brake pads wore out pretty quickly. And I think the thing with that is that this bike has regen braking, but the regen braking is not that strong. So it actually has two stages, and I mentioned that in my other video. It has two stages of regen braking. The first stage is when you just let off, and you feel a little bit of slowing down. That's the first stage of regen. The second stage of regen, if you actually get on the brakes where you activate the brake switch, because the rear brake and the front brake has a little switch. There's a little switch right here. So if you do just enough to activate that switch, like right there, let's see if you guys can hear that. Hear that clicking? So if you do just enough to activate that brake light switch, the second stage regen will kick in, so it brakes even harder. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually activating the actual physical mechanical brakes itself. It's just enough to do the second regen. That kicks in, but even with that, I don't think the engine braking is that high. So because of that, gotta use the actual brakes more often than I would like. I personally, everyone has their own preference and their own riding style. My preference and my riding style is I like to use engine braking mostly. I don't like to use brakes actual brakes very much. I just prefer the engine brake. So this bike, one of the other things that could be better is have more regen braking or stronger regen braking. That way, not just slowing the bike down faster, but also help charge the battery a little bit more too. Because realistically, regen braking on this bike, it doesn't charge you, it doesn't give you much charge at all. So it's not really about giving you more charge. It's just kind of about not taking away charge. It kind of just stays. It keeps your charge constant instead of dropping down. So. Yeah, so that's my thought on this bike. Now this video is getting almost 30 minutes long, but and at one point I thought about getting a charge tank, but I thought about it, I'm like, nah, I don't want to wait around. Even with the charge tank, it's still a 2-hour wait. Well, depending on what your state of charge is, if you're very low, it's still about a 2-hour wait, and I don't want to wait 2 hours. I don't want to ride 80 miles, spirited riding 80 miles and wait 2 hours for another 80 miles of spirited riding. So I decided against that. And it's also, it's pretty expensive too, that charge tank. It's, last time I checked, and this was before other inflation prices. Last time I checked, I think it was $3,000 or something like that. Then on top of that, you can't do it yourself, because you can't just put it in. It's not just a physical thing. You put it in, but you also have to reprogram the bike for it to work properly, to marry the two, to marry that charge tank to the bike. So you need the special equipment that the dealership has. So at a home DIY, you can't really do that. So you have to pay for the labor basically for them to install it. So and when I called in and asked about it, they say it takes, labor-wise, it only takes about 2 hours or so. If everything goes right, it takes about 2 hours to do. Otherwise, possibly 3 hours. But and the labor rate is something like $150 plus an hour. So that's like another $300 for 300 for 2 hours, $450 for 3 hours. So you're looking at, you know, like $3.5 grand essentially for the charge tank. So I was like, oh, that's a little bit too rich for my blood. So and you know, one of the reasons why I got this, that I did mention, besides, you know, the minimum maintenance, is that this thing is so low cost to operate. You know, it's like, you know, I save so much money on not having to get gas. Electricity is so much cheaper, and I get free electricity at work. So that's even better. You know, the only thing is tires, and it doesn't go. If I compare it to like other sporting bikes with, you know, good torque, like for example my XSR 900, this bike doesn't wear out the tires any faster than my SSR 900. You know, when I had that bike, you know, I was changing tires at about every 3,500 miles. So this bike is the same way, you know, every 3,500 miles. And, you know, again, that's spirited riding. That's not, you know, riding like a grandpa. That's riding fast through the mountains, which most of my miles is. You know, I never take this thing on the freeway, or rarely ever do. A couple of times I've done it, but that's not my preference for riding motorcycles. So it's mostly through the mountains. You know, I would say 90% of the mileage I have on this bike that I put on is through the mountains. So when you ride through the mountains, you wear out tires fast, especially when you ride fast through the mountains. So yeah, so tire wear wise, it's, you know, it's no different from any other sporty bikes that I've had. So that cost is the same. So, and everything else is like, there pretty much is no cost, you know. I mean, the brake pads, when I changed that was only like $30, so no big deal. I think that's about the only thing that I've ever had to replace. That, and so there's still the original belt. Everything's still original besides the tires, that brake pad. I haven't even bet the brakes yet. Maybe I should do that this spring, beat the brakes. But yeah. So anyways, yeah, this video is getting way too long-winded now. All right, thanks for watching and listening to my thoughts on the ZeroSR and you know, my experience with it for the last, you know, almost a year and about 6,000 miles or so of riding through the mountains, not just in town, but, you know, through the mountains.